What's up, guys? I'm so excited for kickoff to be here finally, and I'm also so excited for what God has for the entire year as we go through this together and what He has for us from His Word. We're kicking off, of course, as you just saw, our series, Scandalous Grace, and we're going to be in Mark chapter 5, but as you're turning to Mark chapter 5, just a little bit about me. Here's a picture of my family when I'm not hanging out with you guys. I'm with them. It's been said that I'm a little bit like Gru from Despicable Me because I have a pointy nose and I love my girls. And so that's my wife, Carrie, holding our 1.5-year-old Ivy. That's our 10-year-old Bridget, and then I am holding our 6-year-old Cassie. And man, they are amazing, and I'm so thankful for them. Other than that, I am a Cowboy fan. Better or worse, we'll see what happens this year. Hey, it's our year, guys, right? And then I really enjoy a good dad joke, a good pun. And the cringier, the better, just being honest with you. And so with that said, we're going to be in Mark chapter 5, verses 21 through 34 tonight. And we're going to be in this narrative. We're going to be looking at half of it tonight, and we'll look at the second half of it next week in that message with the life of Jairus with his daughter as we kind of see this unfold with Jesus. But setting up where we're going tonight, my brother, he was always like just superstar athlete. I was the typical little brother that just always wanted to look up to him, be around him, and I just never saw him like have a moment of weakness or anything like that. I never really saw him cry, but just a few times in my entire life. And then in addition to that, him being 4.5 years older than me, he would always kind of pick on me like big bros do. You know, like he would walk up to me and just out of nowhere just grab my face and twist his hand and just be like, have a good day. And that's just kind of like typical big bro stuff. Well, like I said, he just was a tough guy. And one day whenever we were little, he was in the backyard, and he came in from the backyard, and he was holding his forearm, and he was crying. And I mean, not like I saw a tear, but like, you know, when the shoulders bounce and you're trying to catch your breath kind of cry. Like, that's what he was doing. And again, like, I'm little brother, and I'm like, ooh, yeah, get you some. How's that feel, huh? Yeah, now it's your turn. And so, like, I'm seeing it, and I'm kind of, like, laughing a little bit in the corner. Probably says a little bit about my sin nature. But he's cupping his forearm and walks over, and he's just crying. He's like, oh, it hurts. And I'm like, did he break his arm or something? I don't know what's going on. And my mom walks over to him. I walk over to him, and he uncovers a wasp that was on his forearm, and it was stinging him repeatedly. Okay, so over and over and over again. And again, being a little brother, I'm like, stings to be you, am I right? And my mom, what she did is she just like, hit it right on off of there, and she was like, that was pretty easy, wasn't it? And it was kind of like, why would you hold on to a wasp when you could have done that the whole time? I don't know. I still don't to this day why that's what he did. Now, why do I start there with that illustration? Well, because my brother was literally holding on to what was hurting him. And we're talking tonight about this message that grace, the grace of God, heals us. But a lot of us, we are coming to God, and we're kind of holding on to, we're cupping in our lives spiritually onto things that are hurting us. And we can experience the healing from the grace of Jesus if we would uncover it before Him. And we're going to see how Jesus can step into our lives and how we can experience His healing as we go through this passage together. So let's read the passage, and then we'll track through it together. Chapter 5, starting verse 21, it says, and when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, my little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live. And he, Jesus, went with him. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years and who had suffered much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and it was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and maybe you're here and you're like, man, I've heard a lot about Jesus, and I'm curious, and that's why you're here. Maybe you're here because you just like fried chicken, but welcome to both of you. And it says, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment, for she said, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well. And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, who touched my garments? And his disciples said to him, you see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, who touched me? They're like, everybody, Jesus, is like crowding around you. What do you mean? And it says he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. As we begin tonight, the first point is simply this: the powerful and the powerless equally need the healing of Jesus. So we see two characters. We see Jairus, he has his little girl who is sick, and as Jesus is going with him, there's this other person that's introduced into the story, and that's this woman who had been bleeding for 12 years, and she is reaching out to Jesus, and both of them are on different sides of the societal spectrum, like economic status, socioeconomic status, just completely different. So a little bit about Jairus. So he's named because he would have been somebody who was known. He would have been known especially in the Jewish culture. He would have been someone who's prominent and someone who has a certain amount of power and clout, because even today, the synagogue is kind of at the center culturally for Jewish people. And so certainly in the time of Jesus, everything that happened kind of flowed through the synagogue. It flowed through where he would have been known and where he had a part to play. And so people would have just known him and he would have been prominent. Yet he finds himself in this place where he's at the end of himself. And he's in this uncontrollable situation where he can't do anything to help his daughter. So he goes to Jesus. And again, we're going to unpack a lot of that with his story next week. But then you have on the other side, you have this woman that's not powerful, but powerless. And she would have been seen as somebody who was unwanted in society, on the fringes of society. Leviticus chapter 15, verse 25 through 27, unpacks how she would have been considered unclean, and also anyone that she would have touched would have been considered unclean, and she would not even have been able to go into the temple to worship with everybody else. So literally on the fringes. And she would have felt untouchable and unwanted and unfit for society. And she was in this place where she can't fix herself. And so she's reaching out to Jesus. Both of them very different places that they come from in life, but equal in their need of Jesus. And this just isn't something that's just in the Bible, but it's true today, just as true today for all of us. Whenever I guess last winter, I got the opportunity to go and serve at a place in town called Dream Center. And this is a place that serves the needy in the Lubbock area. And on Saturdays, they give a free meal. And then those who get a free meal, they get a message with the meal. And so there was a guy that day, as I was just there serving with my small group, that was sharing. And he shared his story. And he was up there teaching the Bible. But he shared about how he started as somebody who was on the streets and happened to stumble into the Dream Center, just like a lot of other people have in their background. And he shared that, man, he was just trying to numb himself at one point in his life with whatever drug he could get a hold of. And he shared about how he found himself in the lowest of low point in his life, and he OD'd and found himself having to get his stomach pumped at the hospital. And then he came to this place where now he was teaching and said, but Jesus met him and encountered him and changed everything. Now, you very well probably, most of us in the room at least, have not been on the street or experienced being the one who has OD'd. Just stats alone would tell me that. But I want you to know that God will meet you at the low place. That God will meet you at the place, man, where you don't have to numb yourself with whatever you're chasing from this world, but you can actually experience the healing of Jesus like this man did. And it's powerful hearing his story coming from this really low place in so many ways. And then right after that, in the same day, that morning, I left Dream Center and I went to go meet with someone that's totally opposite end of the societal spectrum. And I met with the starting third baseman for the Texas Rangers. And I'd met him here. He was a student at one point at Tech. And his rookie season, he wins. He's part of the team. And Josh is part of winning the World Series. And he was talking with me that morning and just said, man, I was left a week after winning the World Series as part of the Rangers. He said, I was left with this gnawing question. This is it? And he's a Christian. And he was saying, like, man, it was just shocking that I could hit the pinnacle of pinnacles of success in Major League Baseball, and something in my soul is saying, I thought it would be better than this. And here's why. Why is it that wasn't enough? Because he was actually made for something greater than the World Series. And so are you. And that greater thing is God himself. That God made you for himself. But both of these people, he was saying, like, man, I just want what Jesus has for me. Both of these people, very, very different, but they are in equal need of Jesus, and that's true for all of us. Highest of highs, lowest of lows, same need. Here's something that's just very true. The ground is level at the foot of the cross. All of us need the healing that only Jesus can give. That's what I mean by the ground is level at the foot of the cross. But what happens is, so many of us, we have gone to the world to try to find healing and satisfaction in that thing inside of us that has longing. And we try to fill it with what the world offers. Here's the next point. The world offers to heal you, but leaves you hurting. And we see this with this woman's story. So it says she's been bleeding for 12 years. And then it says, and she had suffered much, in verse 26, under many physicians, and had spent all she had, and was no better, but rather she grew worse. So this woman says that she tried every doctor that she could. She was every means of her own. She tried to go after and get help for her illness. And man, they did some silly things back in that day. Thank the Lord, we have had lots of medical advances. But one of the things that they would do, and this is all recorded in the Jewish Talmud, so this is things that they actually would do, is one of the doctors that she went to would have given her onions that were cut up, and then they would have mixed onions with some wine because they believed in the medicinal healing properties that it would give to her, and then they would say the incantation, now rise up out of your flow of blood. And I'm like, what in the cult did y'all do? Like, what is going on? Talk about drinking the Kool-Aid. Dude, like, that's wild that this is the stuff that they would do. Another thing that they would practice in this day is they would take the ash of an ostrich, and they would wrap it in a certain type of cloth, and then they would carry it around thinking that was going to heal. I mean, just like imagine, like you get you get COVID, and the doctor's like, hey, eat this ostrich, bro. You'd be like, what? That's weird, right? Like you'd like that was never going to work. It was never going to heal her. And we go, that just sounds silly. Well, from heaven's perspective, man, we go after things over and over again that are never going to heal us. This woman, it says that she went to the doctors of the world, and instead of getting healed, she got worse. And even today, just with medicine, even with all of its advances, we still see this, right? Like in medical world, that the medicine comes with certain side effects. So this woman, she gets worse, and sometimes the medicines we take can actually make us worse. And so if you're like me and you still watch commercials and on Hulu and Netflix because you're a baller on a budget. Anybody, y'all still watch the commercials? Okay, like 3 of us, say a lot of y'all rich people up in this place. I see how it is. And so you'll be watching a commercial though, and I'm sure that a lot of us have seen this, but the commercial will just say something like, "Aren't you tired of sneezing?" And you're like, "I kind of am." Yeah. And then it would say, "You should consider," and then it would give like a 7-syllable word that you could never say if you tried 3 times. And then it would, like, while the commercial was playing, it would talk about, like, it would show like a girl like skipping through daisies, right? And like she would take like a daisy and just smell it, and you're like, "Don't you want to smell flowers like that?" And like, I would really love that. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. And then it gets to the end of the commercial, and it's like, "Then take this once a day." And then what happens at the very end of the commercial, it says, "Side effects include but are not limited to." And how many times have you heard some of those side effects and just been like, "I don't know, man." Like, it'll just be like, some side effects include full body rash, vomiting, nausea, explosive diarrhea. And you're like, "Well, that stinks." See what I did there? And so, and you're like, this is not good. And then it ends and says, "In some serious cases, death." And you're like, "I think I will stick with my hachoo. Thank you very much." And so, like that's kind of what I'm thinking. But they say all these crazy things, and I say that because, man, when it comes to the stuff that we chase for our souls, man, there's side effects that are unwanted. There's side effects that actually don't heal us, but hurt us. Some of the side effects, and man, there's a lot of things I could list. I'll just list a few of them. One of the things we chase to find healing and fulfillment is accomplishment. Like, we think, man, if I get this degree that gets this job, that pays this amount, man, then I'll be good. And it all starts with, I got to get this GPA to get into that specific class or group or whatever. And what happens is that we have this side effect of this unbearable pressure that starts to build up, and sometimes can lead to a breaking point. Or we just go, "Man, success at all costs. I don't care if I hurt myself or others." And we become something that we did not want to be in this chase after accomplishment. But here's what's interesting. There's always another rung on that ladder, isn't there? And it's just one more thing that'll finally satisfy me. And it comes with a lot of side effects whenever we do that. Pleasure, this was the thing that for me, like, man, I chase after, and I can just tell you, worldly pleasure and the party life and all that stuff. Like, man, whenever I was at the wildest parties, doing the craziest things, like whenever I was doing those things was at the moments that my soul was most empty. And man, it was at those moments that as I continued to give myself over to that, I found there was something inside me starving for something more. And we chase after it. And what happens is, man, it all starts with, let's just go to Broadway for Thursday nights. Let's just go do a few Broadway crawls on the weekends. And I mean, it's just fun. And it starts that way. But then what happens is you find yourselves in places you didn't think you would be, doing things that you didn't think you would do. And that's the story that I lived. And it came with the side effect of an empty soul. In our world right now, self-discovery is like huge. Just to say, like, you need to find who you are by searching deeper within yourself. And I'm just saying, the more and more that I have tried to do that, and I've seen others try to do that, the more that we see it's an endless pit. Just sin in general. Like, if we feel like, man, this God is, if there is a God, or for some of us that grew up believing in God, we're like, but God kind of wants to keep me from something, and I want to be free. I want to put God on the back burner during college so I can chase after whatever. And what happens is the things that we were free to pursue end up actually enslaving us. In our pursuit of those things that we thought would give us freedom, we find ourselves slaves. And so, you start looking at pornography because, hey, it's something that a lot of people do. And then you find yourself in a position where, man, like, I just have to look at it now. You find yourself drinking, and then you find yourself at a place where it's like, man, I need this now. You find yourself in sexual encounters with people, and then you find yourself like, just a craving is erupted inside of you where you're like, man, I just need that validation now. And it doesn't actually free you, it actually harms you. And it leaves us in a place where we're more hurt. Yet we try again and again. Albert Einstein, he defined insanity this way: doing the same thing over and over, but expecting different results. And this is where I think it's so easy for us to go after the next thing and the next thing and try again and again and again. And God has something better for us tonight. And that brings me to the next point. When His grace meets your hurt, you experience healing. You experience healing. And we see this play out for this woman in verse 27 through 33. Let's kind of see the scene one more time together. It says that she had heard the reports about Jesus, and she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well. And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, he immediately turned about in the crowd and said, who touched my garments? And his disciples said to him, you see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, who touched me? So he's looking to try to find where this woman is. He's looking for her in the crowd, and it says this woman, even though she was healed, this is really interesting to think about, even though she was healed in this moment, it says that she came in fear and trembling. And she fell at his feet. Why? Well, it's because she reached out and she touched this, what at least from all these other people walking around Jesus, saw him as this rabbi, this holy man, this miracle worker. And who was she to think that she could touch someone like him? Who was she that she could think that she was going to be able to, in her uncleanliness, that she was going to be able to reach out and also make Jesus unclean? Like, who was she to think that? And this would have been so shocking for everybody in the crowd, including this woman, as she would have approached Jesus. Because she knows people like her are not supposed to touch people like him. And whenever it comes to my own story with God, this is what I thought about myself. People like me are not supposed to be in a place like this, serving a God that's holy like him. Who do I think I am? A little bit of my story. My dad has been an alcoholic my entire life. The first time that I had a shot with my dad was actually in third grade, and we were actually at a bar. And that night, him and his girlfriend at the time got in a fight, and she picked up a glass mug to throw it at him and missed him, and it hit me and knocked me out whenever it missed him. And that's just one snapshot to kind of get a picture of the instability that was sometimes around me in my life, specifically whenever I was around him. And from there, I did not grow up going to church all that much, or in a family that pursued Jesus and the things of God all that much. And God ended up getting a hold of my life, though, in middle school, but it was in high school very quickly after that I decided I want nothing to do with God. And I wouldn't say I fell away. I would say I just ran from God as fast as I could. And for me, like I said, it was to give myself to the pleasure of the world, because I felt like God was trying to keep me from something. And my freshman year in high school, I ended up losing my virginity, and from there just started living a promiscuous life, and gave myself over to parties and sexual sin and whatever the next high would be for me, and even started getting involved with illegal activities. And I was just in this pretty tough place. I remember specifically, like, one night we were eating, me and my mom and my stepdad, and like we were I think at like El Chico, and just having some chips and salsa, And we were like giggling, and we're like, ha, ha, ha. My mom goes, ha, 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 and just goes, I don't know how you're going to do it. And like, this is a light moment, right? And I'm like, what do you mean? Well, how am I going to do what? And she just goes, I don't know how you're going to make it in prison. I was like, dang, ouch, Mom. Mom was dropping bars, if you will, because prison has bars. Okay, and just looking for light moments when I can. Suffice it to say, I was not in a good place, and I thought I was just too unclean for God in this moment. But then I was in a place, and I was listening to a message. And as this guy was speaking, I just sensed the Lord reaching out specifically to me and saying, hey, quit running, come back to me. And man, it was such a powerful thing. I just said, okay, God, all that I have, I'm going to just come back to you with all of it. But what I found was a lot of people around me, they didn't know what I had done. They didn't know all the things that I had stored up in my heart. They didn't know the things and activities that I was a part of as I was running from God into all kinds of godlessness. And man, I just felt this shame that started to own my life. But little by little, God started to teach me what Romans chapter 8, verse 1 means whenever Jesus says, for there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And I started to understand that, man, God lifted that weight off of me, and I don't have to carry that because he cast it as far as the east is from the west, and I could just go after God now. I don't have to carry that weight anymore. And I started just inviting my friends to come and hear about Jesus, and I wanted to share the message of the gospel with them, and I started to see a miracle unfold in my own life as God started to change things for me. And I'll show you a picture of a literal miracle. And will you show that picture? My wife, Carrie, godliest person I've ever known. My daughter, Bridget, I got to baptize her. New legacy starting, man. My daughter, Cassie, this summer, she surrendered her life to Jesus. I got to be there and pray with her. And I didn't have any of this growing up. And man, God is showing me what it is to be the dad that I didn't have. As I lead my family in godliness. And I'm not doing it perfect, but man, I'm doing it in pursuit of what God would have. And it is miraculous what I've seen Jesus do. And it's all because I said, God, whatever I have is now yours. And I'm telling you, if you would come to Jesus as you are, you can experience a miraculous move of God in your own life. And if you've thought the thought like, man, but you don't know what I've done, you don't know what I have locked up in my heart, I'm telling you, all you got to do is come as you are and let his healing work begin. You can come to Jesus dirty and you can experience the miraculous move of him cleaning your soul. You can come to Jesus broken and experience the miracle of being made whole. You can come to Jesus hurting and you can experience the miracle of his strength happening in your life. You can even come to him with your doubts and question and experience the miraculous move of God to be present in the midst of those things. You can come to Jesus with your depression and hopelessness and experience him being the light in the middle of that. That's a miracle that you can experience. You can come to him with your fears and experience what it is that he would give you faith in the midst of it. You can come to him with your addiction and you can experience him setting you free. You can come to him with your striving and you can experience him being enough. You can come to him with your sin and experience his miraculous forgiveness over your life. And you can experience a miracle from God. That's what happens with this woman. She reaches out and she experiences this healing touch of God. And then she gets called out of the crowd by Jesus. Why? Well, here's the next point. When you come out of hiding, you experience healing. In verse 33, it says that she comes before Jesus and says the whole truth. She comes before Jesus, going back to my brother with the wasp. And she says, here's the wasp. Will you uncover the wasp? Will you uncover what's hurting you? Will you uncover and just say, God, here is it all. And Jesus didn't call her out because he wanted to humiliate her like she thought. And this is what's so shocking and scandalous about the grace of Jesus. He does the exact opposite of what everybody expected. He not only wanted her to experience having a healed body, he wanted her to experience having a healed soul. My friend Joshua Broom, who's going to be preaching here in a few weeks, he said it this way. He said, to love God with your whole heart, your heart must be whole. And for your heart to be whole, it must be healed. The point is that healing is actually step one. And it's the healing of Jesus meeting you right where you're at. Is what causes you to go, you know what, I actually want to follow after you now, God. I actually want to know what it is to be the man or woman that you've called me to be. I want to know what it is to actually follow you in my Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, not just on Sunday. I want to know what that is. It all happens and flows from the healing of Jesus. And that's why when at the end of this passage, after he calls her out and he closes by saying, that you would be healed. Not only I know you are healed, but now you can be healed. You can actually walk in this. If you're here and you're like, hey, but I've already been saved. Like I've already turned my life over to Jesus. Are you living healed? Are you walking in the daily renewal that God has for you? Are you walking in the direction of life that he would have you go? Are you learning what it means to live in the identity that he's placed on you? That's what happens with this woman. And as we close, the last point is this, is he places an identity over her. His grace changes your identity. Look at verse 34. He says, daughter. This is the only time in the Bible that Jesus calls someone daughter. Only here. And it's to this woman. And the crowd just would have been shocked that not only are you allowing her in this unclean state to touch you, but now you call her out of the crowd and say, you have the closest of relationships with me. You belong to me. She can now approach Jesus and she can approach God with the confidence and access of a child. Like that's a powerful thing for us to wrap our hearts around. One of the greatest theologians in recent history, Timothy Keller, said it like this. He said, the only person who dares wake up a king at 3 a.m. for a glass of water is a child. We have that kind of access. Like, man, this access and confidence. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16 says it like this. Let us then, with confidence, draw near to the throne of grace. Maybe there's something that has separated you and kept you at a distance from God, and I'm praying that God is closing that distance, and you realize you can draw near, and not only can you draw near and he accepts it, he embraces you as his own kid. It says that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need is how Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16 ends. Like, man, we have this confidence. And again, as a dad, with little kids, like I've seen this played out. So right now, our 1.5-year-old, she's at the place in life where she'll just come and wake us up like right in the middle of the night. My wife would say, no, she wakes me up right in the middle of the night and you sleep just fine. But she'll wake us up pretty often, and man, I've just seen this confidence right now with me specifically. I'll get like my late night snack. Anybody late night snack people? So I'll get my late night snack, and this week I got a bowl of Cinnamon Toast Crunch because it's delicious, and so I get my Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and she walks over to me, leaves mommy, walks over to me, gets in my lap, and literally lays her chin on over my bowl. And it's just like looking at me like, this is a us thing now. And I'm going to eat, and I'm like trying to, and she's following, and I'm trying to not give her a bite because, just to be honest, I didn't want to. And so, but she was just like her chin over my bowl, just like, and I was like, fine, here's your bite, gosh. Like that's the confidence of a child. Like that's the way that we get to come to God. Like imagine, for instance, like if one of you, and I was having a bowl of cereal, and y'all came over and you're like, hey, dog, that looks pretty good. and you put your chin over my bowl, I'd be like, I'm gonna call the cops if you don't move. I'm not sharing with you. There's something about a little child that you have confidence to do what other people they wouldn't do. Hey, do you approach God with that kind of confidence? Do you approach God with the confidence as his kid? This woman, she approaches Jesus thinking that she was going to be condemned, and she leaves confident. Confident because of the identity that he's placed on her. Do you walk in the identity that he has placed on you as his child? Like, man, is this how you see yourself? Do you let his grace heal you and then define you? Is this what you have done? Is this what you're doing now? Here's the simple question. What area in your life do you need his grace to encounter you? In what area do you need God to speak to? Where do you need Jesus? As you reach out to him, you're actually reaching out to a God who's reaching out to you. And Jesus, in his closing statement, in the middle of going to help another person, he just, in verse 34 says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." She gets this new identity as a daughter. She gets a new path to live in peace. And then she gets a new way to live, healed. And as you go into this year, what if that could be true for you as you learn what it is to go after Jesus in your life, that you can belong to him as his child. You can live following the path of peace and the way of healing. His grace reaches far enough to reach every single one of us. And I believe it's reaching out to you now. Jesus takes this woman's sickness and gives her his healing. And he'll take your sin. Maybe you're here, you don't know Jesus, man. And he wants to take your sin and give you his salvation. I believe for hundreds tonight that are going to be in this building, God really wants to encounter and wants you to go from lost to found by his grace. Isaiah chapter 53, verse 4 and 5 speaks to what Jesus did to take our sins so we could be defined by his grace and have salvation. Isaiah 53, 4 and 5 says, "Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. He was broken so you could be made whole. And yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. On the cross, man, he paid the price so that you and I could be set free from our sin. It says that he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace." He took the wrath of God, pressed down upon him while he was on the cross. So why? So you and I could receive the mercy of God and have the grace of God now define us. Taking what we deserve and we get now what he deserves. It's just this powerful exchange that he gives us. And then it says, "And with his wounds, we are healed." He died on the cross that way you and I can have life. And we know that because he didn't stay dead. 3 days later, he rose from the grave, and now he is alive forevermore and offers us life here right now. Would we just reach out and touch the edge of his garment that we might experience the healing of God? Man, I pray that it would happen. Let's close in prayer. Jesus, thank you for your healing. Thank you for your healing in my life. Thank you for the fact I believe, God, that you want to speak to every individual in this room. I pray that you would do that. I pray that it would fall on receptive hearts. God, I pray your grace would do a healing work even now under the sound of my voice, God. I pray your grace would encounter us all. Thank you, Jesus. Let's stand and worship together.